Hello, my name is David Kupiec. I'm with the law firm of Kupiec & Martin in Chicago, Illinois. I'm here today to talk about state and local tax issues, specifically the City of Chicago, Cook County, and villages and municipalities within the state of Illinois. My presentation today is based upon a presentation that I gave earlier this year as part of the Illinois Bar Association State and Local Tax Section CLE. One of the first areas I'd like to talk about is the varying tax rates within the state, city, and municipality and county. Illinois, the City of Chicago specifically, has the highest tax rate in the country at 10.25%. That rate consists of 6.25% for the state of Illinois, and then accompanying rates for the county, RTA, and the locality, in this case the City of Chicago if you're doing business in Chicago selling tangible personal property. One way that you can keep up to date on these rates is to visit the Illinois Department of Revenue website, the site number which is appearing on the bottom of the screen right now. Something to note is that these rates are changing on an ongoing basis. Every January 1st the rates change in some localities, so you want to make sure that you and your clients keep up to date on these rates. There's also reductions in the rates, which is also something that you have to keep abreast of, and those are also reported usually through bulletins or the Department of Revenue website. The issue of collecting the correct tax is something that you have to advise your clients on an ongoing basis. There's a different type of services that help you with that program, and it's not only collecting the correct tax, but not collecting an underpayment or an overpayment of tax at any given time. So this is something that you and your clients should discuss on an ongoing basis, as it is an important item for state and local taxes. The next item I'd like to talk about is the City of Chicago Transaction Lease Tax. This is an item that has been getting a lot of publicity in the last year and a half, as the City of Chicago reissued provisions concerning its treatment and interpretation of the lease tax, specifically when it started off with ruling number 12 in 2015, followed by some passages of ordinances in the fall of 2015, and then the creation of some new tax rates in January of 2016. What's kind of interesting in this situation is this is a tax that's been around since 1974. Most people are familiar with it. They refer to it simply as a lease tax, and it's usually on the lease of computer software or other property. But what's interesting over the last year and a half or two is the City of Chicago is basically redefining how they're interpreting different parts of this. One of the things that you need to be careful about is at the high end of this lease tax, it's a 9% tax on the lease payment itself. In 2016, the City of Chicago came out with a reduced rate of 5.25% for certain cloud activities, but you have to make sure that you really fall within those parameters. In 2016, the city also came out with a provision for new businesses, basically exempting them from the tax for their first 5 years, and if their sales are under a certain amount, and if they're properly registered. So if you have a client who's starting up a new business, you want to find out if they're subject to the lease tax, and if they are subject to it, if it's either at the higher 9% rate or the 5.25%, or possibly even exempt under the new business provision. Another item that is to be considered is if you have an existing client who may not have been familiar with this tax and has been conducting business within the City of Chicago. The City of Chicago did have a voluntary disclosure program that did end on December 31st of 2015. However, there is an ongoing voluntary disclosure program that isn't as generous, but is still forgiving in some manners as far as penalty and interest in certain circumstances. In any event, the Chicago lease tax, if you have a client who's doing business or you are a company doing business in the City of Chicago, is something that at a minimum you should become familiar with to make sure that you either are familiar with the fact that you are or are not subject to the tax. The next issue I'm going to talk about is a recent case that's pending before the Illinois Supreme Court, and that's the Hertz and Enterprises case against the City of Chicago. Currently, vehicles that are rented outside of the City of Chicago are not subject to Chicago's lease tax. And what the City of Chicago is proposing in this litigation is that rentals within 3 miles of the City of Chicago are presumed to be used within the city and therefore should be subject to the tax. Oral arguments have been heard on this case, but as of the date of this recording, we're still waiting for a decision. What's interesting in this case is taxpayers and individuals who practice in this area are wondering, is this a type of case that will open the door for other localities, cities, and townships to tax activities that don't happen within their jurisdiction, but there's a presumption that the activity may at some point come in their jurisdiction. In this case, the City of Chicago is saying that if more than 50% of the activity is presumed to happen in Chicago, that the transaction tax should apply. It'll be interesting to see how the Illinois Supreme Court addresses this issue. The City of Chicago did win at the Illinois Appellate Court level, and a lot of people are watching this not only in Illinois and the City of Chicago, but across the country to see if this issue can basically broaden the local jurisdiction's ability to tax activities that may or may not happen within their jurisdiction. And the last area I'm going to mention, which was talked about at our CLE for the state tax section, is that the state, counties and cities and municipalities are always looking for different ways to raise revenues and are constantly looking to new changing businesses. As examples, we look to the ride sharing and the home sharing agreements and other type of activities that are constantly changing. If you are sharing a ride, should you be subject to the limousine or taxi taxes or services that are ongoing? If you rent out your house on an occasional or regular basis, should you be subject to the hotel charges? Are there different types of amusement tax charges, either for different types of publications or plays or anything like that? As of the date of this recording, the Chicago clubs are in the World Series, and the Cook County, just this year in 2016, imposed a new tax for amusement tax purposes on the seller of resale tickets for sporting events. So as you can see, there's always ongoing changes, either through business dealings of yourself or your clients, or different type of technologies, either online or cloud services. It's something that you at a minimum should kind of follow to make sure if you or your clients are subject to tax, and at a minimum make sure that if you are not subject to tax, make sure you do the preliminary research to confirm that position. As you can see, state and local tax is constantly changing. It's not just income tax and property tax. There's a lot going on in the sales and use tax area, not only in the state of Illinois, but in the city of Chicago, Cook County, and the different municipalities throughout the state. And before I conclude today, I want to mention one more time the Illinois State Bar Association State and Local Tax Section, which comprises of a very great group of individuals who have been practicing in the state property, sales, and income tax area for extensive amount of time. They're individuals that represent government, industry, private practice, education, and just basically have dedicated the extent of their careers to practice in state and local tax. The section publishes a newsletter at least once a month and has continuous ongoing CLE. If you get a chance, visit the website of the ISBA for more information regarding the Illinois State Bar Association State and Local Tax Section, and reach out to anyone on the section, or if you want to become a member. If you're interested in state and local tax, it's a great area to practice in, and we'd be more than welcome to talk with you.